That's a little silly when Dilks is picking up Hogak as opposed to Amulet. Dilks literally never loses with Amulet. Doesn't think he can play it right now. We're going to start in Legacy, though, I believe. And we're going to have Daryl Ayers playing 4-color control. Ayers, one of the innovators of this archetype. I think he deserves a lot of credit for bringing this deck to the table.
Yeah, I know somewhere out there he had an article recently where he talked about why this deck ended up the way that it ended up and how these astrolabes basically fix everything you want to do.
Yeah, Ayers been a long time Legacy stalwart. He's going to be taking on Salvatore, who's playing Bomberman. And this is another deck that has gained a little bit of momentum in the format as of late. An explosive 4-card start from Salvatore. Unfortunately, there's 2 baubles in there, both Urza's and Mishra's bauble. But they're going to enable that Mox Opal. And alongside a Cavern of Souls named Inhuman, that's going to put Chalice of the Void on 1 onto the battlefield.
And this is what you want to do, right? You show up with your Chalice of the Void. You want to get it into play for 1 on turn 1 as many times as possible.
Absolutely. And Ayers doesn't want that to happen, is going to burn a Force of Will, pitching a Brainstorm to keep Chalice of the Void off the battlefield.
We'll see when these baubles get cracked. The 4-color control deck does play Thoughtseize in it, so it's good to crack your baubles on the opponent's turn, not expose extra cards to Thoughtseize.
Absolutely. Arkham's Astrolabe in play there for Ayers. That's going to be fixing his mana as the game goes on. Crazy how much Modern Horizons really shook up this Legacy format. Not only Astrolabe, but of course Wrenn and 6 having a big impact. And then we go over to Salvatore's side and you see M20 cards getting a big run of play. It's Mystic Forge, bringing a lot of card advantage to the table for this Bomberman deck.
What got flashed there, Brian? I missed it.
I did not catch it either.
Too fast.
Yeah. Turn is going to head back to Salvatore here. Going to draw a bunch of extra cards from those baubles. Craig, why don't you tell folks exactly what the core of the Bomberman deck is? What are we trying to do on Salvatore's side?
So Bomberman's pretty interesting. It reminds me of the mono red deck a lot, only it's playing white cards instead. So you've got a bunch of ramp in it. You're basically going for a big mana strategy, but as easy as possible. The top end that we're trying to go here is the Auriok Salvager with a Lion's Eye Diamond, so that you can loop that for literally infinite mana, and then you dump all of that mana into something like Walking Ballista, and you win the game that way. But then obviously you have got the Chalice of the Void for disruption along the way. As you noted, we're playing the Mystic Forge. You got Karn the Great Creator. A lot of stuff going on there.
Yeah, both those cards, very dramatic new adds to this archetype. Karn the Great Curator gives you both another piece of disruption and really a win condition once you cash in and get the appropriate cards from the sideboard. It is interesting, this particular Karn board, you're not going to see Mycosynth Lattice. It's just getting Ensnaring Bridge, Wormcoil Engine, or Lion's Eye Diamond, Walking Ballista, Tormod's Crypt. Basically just looking to get that combo online as quickly as possible.
Yeah, the Lattice is particularly expensive,
right?
In this type of format.
Right.
A lot of your mana comes from LED, the Lion's Eye Diamond, and you don't have a hand when that happens.
Salvatore going to play an Ancient Tomb. Deploy Monastery Mentor. Boy, that's nice with a lot of 0 mana cards in your deck, huh?
Yeah, so the Monastery Mentor is the big curveball that comes out of this deck, where you want to fight them on a very controlling axis, and sometimes they just go turn 1 or 2 Mentor, make a whole bunch of guys, and they just beat you down with it.
Yeah, absolutely. It's very good at forcing you to respond in multiple ways. There's the infinite combo pressure, there's the Planeswalker pressure of Karn, there's the ability to lock you under Chalice, and then here's just a potential aggro plan from Monastery Mentor and just whatever 0 mana artifacts you may have laying around. This can get the job done real quick for Salvatore. Ayers agrees. Going to go ahead and use Abrupt Decay to take care of that Monastery Mentor, trying to keep the battlefield a little bit cleaner as long as possible.
Yeah, and Ayers, his deck is set up pretty well for this type of matchup. He does have 2 main deck Plague Engineers, which are super interesting and obviously great at countering, a whole bunch of prowess creatures. Monks, right?
They are monks. And there you see Brian Koval, Invitational Champion. His token was a monk. Mystic Forge has entered the battlefield.
Yeah, this card might be a problem. We see that Ayers has this kind of slower, clunky start. Not a whole lot that he's working with right now. Obviously not pressuring the opponent at all. And this Mystic Forge could get out of control if it's not destroyed real quick.
Absolutely. As we mentioned, an incredible source of card advantage. The colorless experimental frenzy, I've heard it referred to. There you see Mystic Forge, 4 colorless mana. Look at the top card of your library anytime. You may cast the top card of your library if it's an artifact card or a colorless non-land card. Tap, pay 1 life, exile the top card of your library. Powerful stuff from Mystic Forge. Didn't accomplish a whole lot on its first turn on the battlefield.
No, it didn't, but the setup is all there where he has an LED for tons of mana. So if he gets the right card on top of his library, he could potentially just win next turn.
Absolutely. Here's the Thoughtseize from Ayers. That's going to take 1 of Salvatore's 2 copies of Karn, the Great Creator. As we mentioned, things look very promising for Dan's next turn here. Ayers going to go ahead and cast Ponder. Two copies of Kolaghan's Command in the main deck for Daryl Ayers. Certainly happy to find one of those and answer that Mystic Forge, but he's not going to have a lot of time to do so. That card's going to get out of hand very, very quickly.
Yeah, Ayers needs another mana source real bad here.
Finds one.
Yeah, fortunately he has it. And he's a little bit lucky that it's a blue-red source as well, because this Karn can come down and just turn off those Astrolabes.
Absolutely. Salvatore going to use that Mystic Forge to remove the top card of the library. Draws a card. This is an Urza's Bauble cast off the top of the library. Salvatore taps 4 mana, deploys City of Traders, and it's time for Karn the Great Creator. As you mentioned, that is going to shut off those Astrolabes on the other side of the table. It looks like Karn's going to resolve.
Now, he doesn't have a lot of good targets for this matchup, but it's possible that just turning off those Astrolabes is enough of a hindrance to his opponent. And
by that.
Yeah, and he's, like I said, he's so far ahead with the Forge going on here. Lots of mana in play.
Yeah, he's just going to get a Lion's Eye Diamond here. Go ahead, deploy that one. Some prowess triggers for the Brian Koval token. It and the Walking Ballista going to rumble across to the red zone. And Ayers' life total already reaching a precarious state, especially given how much mana Salvatore has access to and how much mana he can put into that Walking Ballista on a future turn.
Well, I wonder if Salvatore was supposed to sacrifice his LEDs and just move in on this Ballista, pump it up a couple of times, and to me it seems clear that Ayers did not have, like, let's say a lightning bolt or some form of interaction. He would have used it already over the past couple of turns.
Right. I think if he moves all in there, he puts Ayers down to 1. So you can see why you may be hesitant in that scenario. Still has access to a play like that on a future turn. And Ayers, in fact, does nothing with the turn, just passes back to Salvatore. Going to go ahead and use that Mystic Forge again, get a City of Traders off the top of the library.
Just using the LEDs while you have
no cards in hand.
Yeah, nothing significant in your hand.
Yeah.
You get the counters onto the Walking Ballista. Obviously, you don't have to remove them right away.
Here's a Chalice of the Void. And I believe that's on 0 plus to animate the Chalice of the Void. Salvatore just cleaning off the top of the library, and here's a good one off the top with that Mystic Forge. It's Walking Ballista. Going to put 3 counters on the Ballista, 6 mana pumped into it. Some prowess triggers on the Cobalt tokens.
Yeah, we're just going through the motions here now. I mean, potentially Ayers could fight his way out of this, but it just seems like he's so far behind.
Yeah, I have to think Colligan's command would be a huge part of any way out of this scenario. It looks like the play is going to be...
Liliana's Triumph.
Right. Sacrifice for Salvatore. Going to sacrifice the smaller Walking Ballista, it looks like.
So it was a long time since, they printed a sacrifice effect like Liliana's Triumph.
Mm-hmm.
And just recently, in what was in the Commander set, that they showed us they made an even better one.
It is a little crazy that in my head, I had assumed that card, like Diabolic Edict, was a little bit too good. Like I had just written off as we'll never see this card again. And then it just makes its way into Standard. And actually sees basically no play.
No play. Oh, no. Standard, it's not good enough.
Yeah, really interesting. Looks like Salvatore has cracked some LEDs, looking to put some mana into this Walking Ballista.
Can't cast that one.
That. Okay, we caught it. We didn't go that far.
Yep.
And to that, Ayers is going to concede. Those static abilities on Planeswalkers, man, people miss those literally all the time.
The board states just get more and more complicated, and it's something that's just there that, you stop thinking about. There's so many cards in the hand. There's so many cards that your opponent can do. You're thinking about a million things, and you forget about the Planeswalker.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. Well, we're going to go to sideboarding here as we move to game 2. Why don't we start over on Ayers' side? There you see 2 Leovold, 2 Nile Spellbound, 2 Red Elemental Blast, 2 Surgical Extraction, 1 Assassin's Trophy, 1 Blue Elemental Blast, 1 Crop Rotation, 1 Hydro Blast, a Caracas, Plague Engineer, and a Pyro Blast. If you're on Ayers' side, what are you doing here, Craig?
So if you're on Ayers' side, I can see wanting to make sure that you don't get infinite looped. So a lot of these artifacts that interact with the graveyard, the Nile Spellbomb seems great, the Surgical Extraction seems fine. I would see the Assassin's Trophy coming in. I could see the other Plague Engineer coming in as a safety net against a bunch of monks.
That makes sense to me. Meanwhile, over on Salvatore's side, we are looking at 1 Ensnaring Bridge, 1 Worm Coil Engine, 1 Lion's Eye Diamond, 1 Walking Ballista, 1 Tormod's Crypt, 2 Disenchant, 3 Swords to Plowshares, and 3 Containment Priests. What do you like if you're over on Salvatore's side?
So I can't see a lot of changes happening here. This matchup against this very controlling deck just doesn't lend itself to any of these cards. Obviously, you don't want the Swords to Plowshares, you don't want the Containment Priest, all of the artifacts you want sitting around in your sideboard for Karn to go and grab at the right time. So I can see him not making any changes potentially.
Yeah, it's an interesting spot for Salvatore. I mean, you don't think there's any value to Swords to Plowshares in this matchup?
I mean, not a ton. With what he wants to do, with the cards that he would need to kill.
You're right.
Like Baleful Strix already gets cleaned up pretty easily by Walking Ballista.
Plague Engineer is the point of concern I have, but I understand just thinking it's the targets are so slim that it's very difficult to bring in a large number of Swords to Plowshares.
Sure, and the Plague Engineer is almost always going to hit the board after a Monastery Mentor hits the board, cleaning up all the monks right away.
Right.
And then the idea that you would kill the Plague Engineer and have a bunch of cards to rebuild a monk army just seems like a very corner case scenario to me.
Right. No, that makes sense. I hear what you're saying. Well, we are going to take a moment now to acknowledge a unfortunately tragic topic. We lost a Magic player. Many of us, including myself, were close friends with. Alex Stratton, unfortunately, passed away a little over a week ago now. someone I've known for over a decade. He was from my hometown. And we just want to take a moment to let everyone out there know, one, how much we're missing Alex. Two, there are resources available if you're having trouble. You can always reach out to the National Suicide Prevention Lifeline. There you see the phone number, 1-800-273-TALK. If you want to know more about this organization, you can go to www.suicidepreventionlifeline.org. I can't tell you how devastating it was over the past week to reckon with the loss of Alex. I don't want to see anyone else in our community lost to the tragedy that is suicide. I encourage you to seek out help. And if you are, like me, grieving the loss of Alex, I'm happy to talk about him. I've met so many people over the past couple of weeks who I had never spoken to before, and we've shared stories of Alex, and I think that's a common trend. He touched a lot of people in the community. Just wanted to take a moment to acknowledge you, Alex. We miss you, and resources are there if you need help, everyone. Bit of a somber note, but it would be... I don't want to pretend like Alex didn't exist. We have to acknowledge the situation. It's incredibly tragic, but resources are there. Help is available. I encourage you to seek them out.
Yeah, it's so rough when we lose a member of our community.
Absolutely, yeah. And Alex's reach was far and wide. He knew everyone in the Northeast because he lived in the Albany region. He knew everyone in the Southeast because he lived in Tampa for a while. He traveled everywhere for Grand Prix, SCGs. He just reached all across this community, and definitely feeling that sting right now. Are going to transition back into the action. You see Ayers led on a ponder. Just the plains on Salvatore's side.
Yeah, how different is this game from our first one?
Very different, yeah. Meanwhile, the team of Salvatore, Mark, and Young all up a game in the 3 matches. 4-color Urza versus Hogak, one of our other matches. Bant Scapeshift versus Bant Ramp going on in Standard.
Yeah, it seems like this Urza deck in Modern has really stepped up to be one of the archetypes that can battle back against the Hogak deck.
Here's one of those big new plays from Daryl Ayers. It's Renin 6, the 2-mana Planeswalker, outclassing Tybalt by quite a bit, immediately returning a land to Ayers' hand. It's a source of card advantage. It kills opposing creatures. It does basically everything for just 2 mana. Doesn't kill Monastery Mentor, though.
Does not. It could take down a monk along the way.
Mm-hmm.
But also, to me, I think this is the dream if you're playing this 4-color control deck, right? Your opponent has a start where they put very little pressure on you. You get to set up your hand with the Ponder. You get to play the Ren 6, immediately get a card back.
Mm-hmm.
And now his mana is all online. Look at that mana base. Makes me laugh a little bit.
Beautiful. Just as Garfield intended. Ayers is just going to plus.
Oh, the bauble.
Such a silly card. Lets you look at a random card from opponent's hand. Draw a card. Here's Plague Engineer. That is going to clean up that monk token. Of course, Death Touch on that Plague Engineer ensures it will be able to trade with Monastery Mentor if it chooses to attack. I'm sure it will not, given that circumstance. But it's effectively protecting Renin 6 right now.
Yeah, and that Renin 6 ultimate, it's a real thing.
Oh, yeah. Absolutely. Now, this is a fantastic start for Ayers, but this Bomberman deck, like its namesake, can prove to be explosive out of nowhere. Only needs a single turn to win the game. Here comes Karn. That's going to be met with Force of Will from Ayers, pitching a Snapcaster Mage. And over on the left-hand side, you do see Renin 6, the freshest 2-mana Planeswalker on the planet. Sorry, Tybalt.
It's unreal that they made this thing to me.
Yeah.
It's just so good.
It is so good. So good. 2-mana recurring card advantage source. I mean, I think it's pushed entire archetypes out of the Legacy format. Death and Taxes is at a low point right now. You still see some players playing it. That's the way Legacy goes. Some people are hard-priced into their decks. But Renin 6 does a number on all those 1-toughness creatures.
Well, and I think if Modern slows down at all, you know, we're going to get a band-restricted update in not too long.
Right.
And it's possible that Wrenn and 6 turns into a problem in Modern if that format slows down at all.
I could certainly see that happening. Jund already very close to top tier, but Hogak squeezes out a lot of stuff. I would include Jund in that list. Honestly, to me, Hogak squeezes out everything. I think if you're not playing Hogak, you're mostly making a mistake. But I will say representation for the Hogak deck, lower than you would expect given how good it is. I think a lot of that is people anticipating a ban.
I think that's part of it. I think part of it is people want to play what they want to play.
Right.
And if everyone thinks that Hogak's going to be the top deck, everyone's committing so many sideboard cards to beating Hogak, it's possible that there's an edge to be gained by showing up with something less expected.
There's not, Craig. There's just not. It's like such a good deck. Here's the Ponder from Ayers.
That's a fair response, I think.
Yeah, some of the data that's come out around Hogak points it as one of the most dominant decks in history.
Well, and it's stuck around longer, right? Like, when the Eldrazi deck was too good, it didn't stick around for so long.
Right. Well, people thought the problem was effectively managed by the Bridge from Below ban. Not true. Meanwhile, here's a Fatal Push.
Maybe some people thought that.
From Ayers. Well, I thought it. I'm going to include myself in that group. I thought Bridge from Below would be enough to bring the deck down a peg. It was not.
So you eliminated this turn 2, turn 3 wins from the deck where they just mill out the opponent for everything. Mm-hmm. But there are times when it still feels like the Hogak deck has won on turn 2 or 3. Even though the opponent isn't dead, they just have such an overwhelming advantage that, turns 4 or 5, the opponent is dead.
Absolutely. Here's a Karn, the Great Creator, from Salvatore's side. Going to tap that Ancient Tomb and that City of Traders for 4 mana. This one's going to stick. And let's see what the grab is from the sideboard here. As we mentioned, it doesn't feel like the sideboard options are particularly explosive for Salvatore. Mostly has to content himself with getting a little value.
Yeah, I wonder if it's just Walking Ballista here.
It's reasonable. Play a 4-mana Walking Ballista on the next turn.
There's also a chance that it's LED to set up for a future turn.
Mm-hmm. We'll have to see what Salvatore likes here. It's going to be Walking Ballista. Yeah, to your point, Craig, I actually came to the conclusion that I believe the Bridge from Below ban made Hogak a better deck. I think not having to play Bridge from Below to keep up with the mirror allowed the deck to be better in most of its other matchups.
Yeah, I mean, Satyr Wayfinder it's so funny that this 2-mana 1/1 is so good for the deck. It just smooths things out so much.
Yeah. So Salvatore played a second Plains. That caused the City of Traders to head to the bin. Used that mana to play a 2-mana Walking Ballista. 1 counter on that Ballista right now.
Yeah, I'm a little surprised to see the Walking Ballista on 1 with the Wrenn and 6 there to just take care of it at any second. But it's possible that Dan is saying, hey, I just need to distract this thing. I can't let it get to the ultimate range.
Yeah, maybe just buying a little time, looking to set up infinite combo turn in the future. It's hard to say exactly what Dan was looking to achieve there without knowing the exact contents of his hand.
And if Ayers has Wasteland now with the Wrenn and 6, which is...
there you go.
This is the part where the game just gets super tough for the opponent.
All right. Is going to plus Wrenn and 6 to return a fetch land on this turn. Ayers not going to use Wasteland here.
Which tells you he probably just wants to hardcast Force of Will, right? Like he has 5 mana up. Yeah. Like this is, if I'm sitting on the other side, just the alarm bells are going off.
Absolutely.
But also I think Dan is in such a tough spot here that he has to just kind of plow through it.
Here's another Karn minus. Salvatore going back to that same set of cards, looking for a little bit of help. It's going to be Worm Coil Engine this time. That's an interesting one. Do we have another 2-mana land in hand? Oh, we do. How about a Lotus Petal? And here comes Worm Coil Engine. Yeah, looks like we may have paid 7 here.
Yeah, I'm not sure what happened there. It's possible that he forgot that he had double soul land.
It is possible. But regardless, the end result is Worm Coil Engine, as you mentioned, Craig, though. Force of Will in hand for Ayers, ready to hard cast that one. Good thing. I don't think many Legacy decks are equipped to beat Worm Coil Engine. Plague Engineer is going to go ahead and attack down the Karn, and you see a double Wasteland turn for Ayers, taking care of both Soul Lands. Follow up just Urza's Bauble from Salvatore. Another plus, Renin 6, another Wasteland. How about Jace the Mind Sculptor? This is getting out of control very quickly.
Yeah, this is the point. Like, hey, I've had my Planeswalker, my 2-mana Planeswalker in play since turn 2. I've countered everything you've done. I've got my Plague Engineer as the safety net. Obviously, the control deck looks great here, right?
Yeah, look at what this control deck is capable of doing. How many types of permanents it can answer now. How many different strategies it can account for. You can see why this deck has garnered so much success recently.
Yeah, looking at the deck, you have a smattering of different answers, and then you just have so much card draw and deck manipulation. When you're looking at the Ponders, the Brainstorms, Big Jace, the Baleful Strix that likes the cantrip.
Here we see the namesake card of the deck on the other side of the battlefield for Salvatore. It's Auriok Salvagers. That enables the Bomberman combo. Not if it's not on the battlefield, though. And Jace is going to return it to hand. Ayers continues to work on those lands, gets a Renin 6 emblem.
Yeah, now it's just over.
Yeah, all those spells in graveyard with Retrace. There you see Auriok Salvagers, return target artifact card with converted mana cost 1 or less from your graveyard to your hand. I'm sure you can cleanly see how that makes infinite mana with your Lion's Eye Diamond. Meanwhile, over in one of our other matches, we do have a result. It's Raphael Mark playing 4-color Urza, taking down Matthew Dilks and the Hogak Menace 2-0. And with Ayers firmly in control of this game, we're going to head off to a deciding Game 3 in this matchup.
And what's interesting to me here in this matchup is just how mediocre Karn felt when it was tutoring up artifact threats.
I have to tell you, Karn was a card I was so high on at its initial printing in both Modern, in Legacy. It's been underwhelming in most archetypes. Now, the archetypes is impactful. I'll say it's still very good. But I think it casts a more narrow net than I first expected. I thought a lot of decks would be shoehorning in Karn successfully, and I think Bomberman is a good home for it. I don't want to downplay its effectiveness in this particular deck. This is one I think is on the up because of Karn. I would include Mono Red Prison in that list as well. But I thought its net would be cast much wider. I thought more Eldrazi decks would pick it up, things like that. And they have. It's just not really getting the job done in some of those decks.
Yeah, I agree with you. A lot of those decks, like the Eldrazi deck, it just wants to be attacking the opponent. It wants to, lock things up with a Chalice of the Void and then just finish the game as fast as possible.
And it's funny we're having this discussion while we have the Amulet Cabal sitting on the left side of the table, because that was a team. These are 3 obviously very well-known Amulet Titan players in the Modern format. They were split, though, on whether they thought Karn would be a part of the deck going forward. I think both Ayers and Edgar liked it at first. Dilks did not. Eventually, everyone came around to Dilks' way of thinking, and now it's basically a miss in Amulet for the most part.
Yeah, I think it's one of those things where the allure of it it's another card that seems to just win the game by itself.
Right.
But the games where you're behind, it is not nearly impactful enough. Mm-hmm. It costs 1 million mana to actually do something with it. And often, like I said, you're behind, the opponent's got a couple creatures on the board. They just kill it and keep attacking you.
Yeah, I think even Mono Green Tron I would also add to the list of a deck that was really excited about the presence of Karn the Great Creator, and as time has gone on, it just kind of seems like it's not a good fit. You don't have enough ways to protect it. It just dies immediately. And if in this format where a 0 mana artifact is inherently playable, Tormod's Crypt matters so much against several decks, if Karn's not shining there, where is it going to shine is my question.
Well, yeah, it's funny that you say that. I mean, that's not really a problem with Karn to me. That just speaks to how fast the graveyard decks are, how aggressive the format is.
Oh, great point.
You can't be spending turn 3 or 4 to tutor up your Tormod script. You need that thing in play starting on turn 1 in order to have an impact in the game.
That's why Leyline of the Void now probably the most played card in Modern. But we're ready for more Legacy action. We're going to start, again, just basic planes on Salvatore's side. Ayers going to go ahead and lead on Thoughtseize. Takes a look at the grip. Looks like Mox Opal, Mishra's Bauble, Walking Ballista, Karn the Great Creator, Cavern of Souls, Caracas for Salvatore. Ayers is going to go ahead and take that Karn the Great Creator out of hand. Makes sense. Only real payoff for that hand.
Yeah, and a card like Thoughtseize is just so good against Bomberman. It gives you the information about what angle you need to fight against with this deck. And also, the Bomberman deck has a lot of air in it. A lot of air in it.
Absolutely.
So you're able to strip away one of the few threats, and it just gives you so much breathing room.
Yeah, and time is on the side of Ayers. Ayers wants this game to stretch out into perpetuity, get those powerful permanents online. So doing something like just playing baubles for a turn and having to wait for the next turn until they become effective cards, that really plays into Ayers' favor. There's that Mox Opal. It's coming alongside a bunch of artifacts, so it is going to be turned on. Salvatore taps 2 mana, is going to play a Walking Ballista on 1. Salvatore's been aggressive with those ballistas, often deploying them at the first chance. Of note, could have played it on 2.
Yeah.
Should he so choose. Could have cracked a Lotus Petal. Chose not to.
Yeah, I'm a little surprised. 2 just seems like, I don't know, you're not losing much by putting on 2. It's just a better creature, right? And then it's sized to deal with Plague Engineer. You put it on 2 now, you can pump it to 3 the next turn. You could potentially attack a Renin 6 and then ping it down. Still have your Walking Ballista on the board.
Maybe concerned about losing access to the mana from Mox Opal was Salvatore. I think that's a potential reason.
Sure. He also, if he doesn't know his opponent's deck very well, he could be trying to play around Daze a lot of this time.
Okay. I think that's a reasonable assumption. Here's a nice play from Salvatore. It's going to be Mystic Forge. And that's going to immediately provide some card advantage in the form of Lion's Eye Diamond, which just enters the battlefield from the top of the library.
And this is potentially a problem card. It makes me say, what is in Daryl's hand over there? You know, maybe he's got a bunch of Colgan's commands or something, so he feels okay.
Yeah.
But this is the type of hand. I just can't imagine that he wouldn't force of will that card if he could. Which tells me that Ayers kept a hand that, you know, potentially just dies some amount of the time.
It's possible. Could have Colligan's command in hand and thinks he can just fade a turn.
Sure, yeah.
Forge.
If he does have the K command, I could see waiting the turn. You just get the maximum value blowing up the Forge and getting the Walking Ballista.
Ayers is going to go ahead and crack a fetch land here. Salvatore brought in Disenchant from the sideboard. That is the card we see. That was removed by Mystic Forge. It's an interesting grab. Astrolabe, Strix.
Yeah, it's possible that he's worried about a Leyline of the Void or something like that out of the opponent's deck.
Right.
Null Rod, perhaps. You know, it might just be a standard. You bring this card in when you don't know exactly what the opponent's doing because you need that sort of safety net.
Yeah, I can buy that. Here's a Leovold from Daryl Ayers. Bit of a clock online, bit of disruption in some ways. Oh, but a nice follow-up here from Salvatore. It's Monastery Mentor.
Yep, and
Urza's Bauble off the top of the library.
with the Cavern of Souls, you can't counter the Mentor.
Yep.
And now we've got potentially piles and piles of cards coming out of the Forge.
Mystic Forge, such an important pickup for this deck. That's a card that's qualities are only beginning to be explored. Seeing vintage play, widespread vintage play at this point. Unsurprising. I think everyone saw this card and assumed as much. Here's another Lion's Eye Diamond. A lot of mana over on Salvatore's side of the battlefield. Passes the turn back to Ayers.
How does this bauble work? Is this next upkeep or end of the turn bauble?
I believe it's next upkeep.
Okay.
We can get confirmation on
so
that.
we need to be careful here, right? If you're on Dan's side of the board, that you don't end up jamming yourself up with the Leovold.
Right, you want to time your draws very carefully. Leovold, of course, similar to Narset, each opponent can't draw more than one card each turn. Whenever a permanent you control becomes the target of a spell or ability an opponent controls, you may draw a card. There you see Urza's Bauble. Tap, sacrifice, bauble. Choose a random card from target player's hand. Look at that card. Ignore this ability if player has no cards. Draw a card at the beginning of next turn's upkeep.
Oh, no.
Yeah, you really want to do this on your turn, and then as you move into your opponent's turn, get your draw.
I think... Okay, so they're talking about bouncing the Leovold.
Right. That is going to draw a card from the Leovold ability. Now we're going to go ahead and crack Bauble. I'm assuming this is all in Ayers' end step.
Sure.
And I think that puts Ayers at 8 in hand. May have to discard here. But we do have to resolve this Bauble trigger and see what card we're looking at. That's a tricky one. I was super happy I was able to go through my old boxes of cards and find my Urza's Baubles and dust them off for future Bomberman play, which I'm sure I will never, ever do.
Yeah, this doesn't seem like something that's in your wheelhouse.
No, it's not really. I like to tell myself that I need to be prepared for all situations. Although I mostly come into the booth now, so I'm not exactly sure what I'm preparing for, but... Uh-oh. This is a problem. Here's Auriok Salvagers.
Put the opponent to the test. He's got the LEDs in play.
And this is cast via Cavern of Souls, so you're not responding on the stack. 2 LEDs in play.
Yep.
This is a problem. This is a big problem. That LED is going to come back. Yeah, that's going to get the handshake, and that is going to do it. The team of Salvatore, Mark, and Young take down Ayers, Dilks, and Magalhaes. Of course, what was going to happen there was infinite mana from the Salvagers alongside the LED. That was going to make the Walking Ballista infinitely big with no removal spell for the Ballista, I'm assuming.